flowers and blossoming trees on all sides, large scarlet blossoms and hanging purple and white flowers, and trees covered with the fragrant bell-shaped flowers like lilies, which the people here call the floripondio, together with a profusion of double pink roses that made the air fragrant as we passed, and here and there a church, a ruined convent, or a white hacienda. We had the advantage of clear weather, not always to be found at Jalapa, especially when the north wind, blowing at Vera Cruz, covers this city and its environs with a dense fog. We stopped at a small village to change horses, for on leaving Jalapa our mules were exchanged for 8 strong white horses, and here Don Miguel made us enter a very pretty house, belonging to some female friends of his, one of whom was very handsome, with a tasteful white turban. The curiosity of this place is a rock behind the house, covered with roses, clove carnations, and every variety of bright flower tree, together with oranges, lemons, limes, and cedrats, all growing out of the rock. The ladies are very civil, though I dare say surprised at our admiration of their December flowers, and gave us orangeade and cake, with large cedrats and oranges from the trees; but above all, the most delicious bouquet of roses and carnations, so that together with the unknown scarlet and purple blossoms which the captain of the escort had gathered for me, the diligence inside looked like an arbour. We continued our journey, the road ascending towards the tableland, and at one striking point of view we got out and looked back upon Jalapa, and round upon a panorama of mountains. Gradually the vegetation changed. Fine fresh looking European herbage and trees succeeded the less hardy though more brilliant trees and flowers of the tropics. The banana and chirimoya gave place to the strong oak, and higher still, these were interspersed with the dark green of the pine. At San Miguel de los Soldados we stopped to take some refreshment. The country became gradually more bleak, and before arriving at the village of Las Vigas, nearly all trees had disappeared but the hardy fir which flourishes amongst the rocks. The ground for about 2 leagues was covered with lava and great masses of black calcined rock, so that we seemed to be passing over the crater of a volcano. This part of the country is deservedly called the Mal Pais, and the occasional crosses with their faded garlands that gleam in these bleak volcanic regions give token that it may have yet other titles to the name of Evil Land. The roses and carnations that I had brought from Jalapa were still unwithered, so that in a few hours we had passed through the whole scale of vegetation. The road became steep and dreary, and after passing Cruz Blanca, excepting occasional cornfields and sombre pine forests, the scene had no objects of interest sufficient to enable us to keep our eyes open. The sun was set, it grew dusk, and by the time we reached Perote, where we were to pass the night, most of us had fallen into an uncomfortable sleep, very cold and quite stupefied, and too sleepy to be hungry, in spite of finding a large supper prepared for us. The inn was dirty, very unlike that at Jalapa, the beds miserable, and we were quite ready to get up by the light of an unhappy specimen of tallow, which the landlord brought to our doors at 2 in the morning. There are some scenes which can never be effaced from our memory, and such a one was that which took place this morning at Perote at 2 o'clock, the moon and the stars shining bright and cold. Being dressed, I went into the kitchen, where C n, the officers of the Jason, Don Miguel, and the Mexican captain of the last night's escort, were assembled by the light of one melancholy sloping candle. Together with a suspicious-looking landlord and a few sleepy Indian women, with bare feet, tangled hair, copper faces, and riboses, they made us some chocolate with goat's milk, horrid in general, and rancid in particular. It appeared that all parties were at a standstill, for by some mistake in the orders, the new escort had not arrived, and the escort of the preceding night could go no further. Don Miguel, with his swarthy face and great serape, was stalking about rather out of humour, while the captain was regretting, in very polite tones, with his calm, Arab-looking, impassive face, that his escort could proceed no further. He seemed to think it extremely probable that we should be robbed, believed, indeed had just heard it asserted, that a party of ladrones were looking out for el Señor Ministro, regretted that he could not assist us, though quite at our service, and recommended us to wait until the next escort should arrive. To this advice our conductor would by no means listen. He was piqued that any detention should occur, and yet aware that it was unsafe to go on. He had promised to convey us safely, and in 4 days, to Mexico, and it was necessary to keep his word. Some one proposed that two of the men should accompany the diligence upon mules, as probably a couple of these animals might be procured. The captain observed that though entirely at our disposal, two men could be of no manner of use, as, in case of attack, resistance except with a large escort was worse than useless. Nevertheless, it was remarked by some ingenious person, that the robbers seeing two, might imagine that there were more behind. In short, there were various opinions. One proposed that they should go on the coach, another that they should go in it. Here I ventured to interpose, begging that they might ride on mules or go outside, but by no means within. As usual, it was as the Señora pleased. At length we all collected before the door of the inn, and a queer group we must have made by the light of the moon, and a nice caricature, I thought to myself, our friend Mr. G would have made of us had he been there. The diligence with 8 white horses and a Yankee coachman, originally, no doubt, called Brown, but now answering to the mellifluous appellation of Bruno. A with her French cap and loaded with sundry mysterious looking baskets, I with cloak and bonnet, C n with Greek cap, cloak, and cigar, the captain of the Jason also with cloak and cigar, and very cold, the lieutenant in his navy uniform, taking it coolly, Don Miguel with his great sarape and silver hat, 6 people belonging to 5 different countries, the Mexican captain with his pale impassive face and moustaches, enveloped in a very handsome sarape, and surrounded by the sleepy escort of the preceding night. Dirty looking soldiers lounging on the ground, wrapped in their blankets, the Indian women and the host of the inn, and a bright moon and starry sky lighting up the whole, the figures in the foreground, and the lofty snow-clad mountains, and the dismal old town of Perote itself, that looked gray and sulky at being disturbed so early, with its old castle of San Carlos, and cold sterile plains. Meanwhile, 2 soldiers with cloaks and arms had climbed up outside of the coach. The captain remarked that they could not sit there. Bruno made some reply, upon which the captain very coolly drew his sword, and was about to put a very decided impediment to our journey by stabbing the coachman, when Don Miguel, his eyes and cigar all shining angrily, rushed in between them. High words ensued between him and the captain, and the extreme coolness and precision with which the latter spoke was very amusing. It was as if he were rehearsing a speech from a play. "I always speak frankly," said Don Miguel in an angry tone. "And I," said the captain, in a polite measured voice, "am also accustomed to speak my mind with extreme frankness. I regret, however, that I did not at the moment perceive the Señora at the door, otherwise," etc. At length the 2 little men, who with their arms and sarapes looked like bundles of ammunition, and who, half asleep, had been by some zealous person, probably by our friend Bruno, tumbled upon the diligence like packages, were now rolled off it, and finally tumbled upon mules, and we got into the coach. Don Miguel, with his head out of the window, and not very easy in his mind, called up the 2 bundles and gave them directions as to their line of conduct in a stage whisper, and they trotted off, primed with valour, while we, very cold, and, I answer for myself, rather frightened, proceeded on our way. The earliness of the hour was probably our salvation, as we started 2 hours before the usual time, and thus gained a march upon the gentlemen of the road. We were not sorry, however, when at our first halting place, and whilst we were changing horses, we descried a company of lancers at full gallop, with a very good looking officer at their head, coming along the road, though when first I heard the sound of horses' hoofs clattering along, and by the faint light discerned the horsemen enveloped as they were in a cloud of dust, I felt sure they were a party of robbers. The captain made many apologies for the delay, and proceeded to inform us that the alcaldes of Tepeyagualco, La Ventilla, and of some other villages, whose names I forgot, had for 20 days prepared a breakfast in expectation of his Excellency's arrival; whether 20 breakfasts, or the same one cold, or réchauffé, we may never know. The captain had a very handsome horse, which he caused to caracoler by the side of the diligence, and put at my disposal with a low bow every time I looked at it. He discoursed with C n of robbers and wars, and of the different sights which these gentry most affected,